Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Saints Insider postgame show. I'm Zach Ewing, live here at the Caesars Superdome, and we are here after another dispiriting Saints loss. Raiders 25, Saints 10, the final in the last home game of the year for the New Orleans Saints. Next time they play a meaningful game here, it will be September. There will be a new coach on the sideline, and there will be a whole bunch of changes. And we will talk about exactly what went wrong in this one and what some of those changes might be over the next 30 or 40 minutes here. We're also going to show your comments and questions live on the air and talk about them. Spencer, our producer, will show. He's going to text me the comments so I can see them while he shows them live on the air. And all we ask is that you do keep those clean. We can't be showing just any old thing. We know some of you may be pretty frustrated with the New Orleans Saints at this point. So Darren Rizzi is in there talking to the press right now. Our guys, Matthew Paris, Luke Johnson, Rod Walker, and Jeff Duncan will be out in short order to discuss this one with me. But we'll go over it a little bit here and take your comments live. It's a 25-10 Raiders final. This season's Saints Insider postgame coverage is brought to you by Tulane Doctors. Now at East Jefferson General Hospital, Tulane doctors are bringing academic medicine to more patients in new communities. Look for the shield to know the future of medicine is here. Call 504-988-5000 to schedule with any Tulane doctor or visit TulaneDoctors.com. All right, lots to talk about today. After this 25-10 Saints loss, it drops the Saints to 5-11. It is their third straight loss after it looked like they had some momentum. Under Darren Rizzi, but they've now lost 3 in a row. The last home game here to the Washington Commanders, a game lost on the final play of the game. Then the blowout Monday night loss in Green Bay. And then, honestly, a pretty uncompetitive loss to the Raiders here today. Las Vegas controlled this one pretty much from start to finish. The Raiders took the opening kickoff, held the ball for more than 9 minutes, ended up settling for a field goal. Looked like they had scored a touchdown from Amir Abdullah, but he was ruled down just inside the 1 yard line. They went backward from there, took a sack. So the Saints defense stiffens, holds them to a field goal. Saints actually did take a lead 7-3 on a trick play. Clearly the highlight of the day for the Saints. Kendry Miller took a handoff to the right, threw it back to Spencer Rattler to the left, and then he hit a wide open Foster Moreau in the end zone for a 30-yard touchdown pass. That gave the Saints a 7-3 lead. But the Raiders scored 10 unanswered points, go up 13-7. They led 13-10 at halftime, and then they outscored the Saints 12-0 in the second half as things got a lot more difficult for Spencer Rattler after that first half. So we'll talk a lot about things. Appreciate you all hanging out with us today, but the Saints are 5-11 and, just playing out the string. They end the season at Tampa Bay next Sunday, and then it'll be all eyes on what they do at the head coach position. So Darren Rizzi, the interim coach, with these 3 straight losses, got to figure that doesn't help his case to become the permanent coach, although I wouldn't eliminate him. We'll see what our guys think, but I wouldn't eliminate him quite yet either, just from the standpoint of I don't know that winning these games is the most important thing. You want to see some young players develop. Obviously, the offense got a lot of injuries. The defense has some aging players who have become very ineffective. And so, I don't know that you can blame Darren Rizzi for all of this. We'll see what the Saints decide to do. But most likely, you're looking at a new head coach next year, and we'll find out in just maybe about 8 days or so what the Saints decide to do with Darren Rizzi, and from there who they may hire for the 2025 season. So lots to talk about on the postgame show. We'll continue to break it down here on the Saints Insider, and we'll be back after this break to continue the postgame show.
At Tulane Doctors, we know your health can't wait.
So we made booking appointments easier than ever.
Just dial 988-5000 to book with any physician, any specialty.
Whether at East Jefferson General Hospital or one of our other locations.
Because your health is our top priority.
And because navigating healthcare should be simple,
personal,
accessible.
When you see the shield, you'll know the future of medicine is here.
better place to parlay than Caesars Sportsbook. Parlay Builder gives you all the game day action from all across the league. Multiple games, legs, and props, all in one spot. It's so quick and easy, you can keep your focus on the games and your nachos. Or if you're focusing on one game, remember, you can place your same game parlays live during the action. Caesars Sportsbook, the only sportsbook app with Caesars rewards.
All right, welcome back to the Caesars Superdome. I'm Zach Ewing, awaiting to be joined by our Times-Picayune writers, Saints beat writers Luke Johnson and Matthew Paris, and our New Orleans sports columnists Rod Walker and Jeff Duncan. They will be here shortly after talking to Darren Rizzi, quarterback Spencer Rattler, and some of the other Saints. Got some comments coming in. Marcus Fuller says, as much as this hurts, it was inevitable dating back to 2014 with the kicking the can down the road philosophy. Rebuild is in session. Yeah, I mean, I would like to think so. The Saints are certainly setting up for that. They're going to have their highest draft pick they've had in a while. Actually, the funny thing about that is that they've lost these 3 games in a row and barely moved up in the draft order at all. The Saints are at 5-11 and still think the third straight week they're sitting at number 10. Now, if they lose last week, lose next week, there's a chance that they could move up. There's, I think, 4 or 5 teams with 4 wins, including the Raiders, who would be lower than the Saints because they beat them today. If the Raiders were to beat the Chargers in, I think, what is a meaningless game for the Chargers next week. I have to look at seeding and see if there's any chance they could move out of a 6th seed in the AFC. But there's some possibilities for the Saints to move up with another loss. But regardless, it looks like the Saints would have a top 10 pick. They haven't traded any of their draft picks for the first time in a long time. And they did trade one to Washington in that deal, but got more picks back. And we'll see what they do with the salary cap. But I certainly agree with Marcus. It's time to cut bait on some of these contracts. Let the dead money expire. Bite the bullet. You're probably not going to be very good next year anyway. Although it's interesting, there is a chance, actually, with a loss next week, the Saints could fall into last place, which makes your schedule in 2025 that much easier. So I don't think you want to play that game again where you go, oh, look, the schedule's bad. I could see a path to 9 or 10 wins. Probably just bite the bullet. The new coach should understand that the first year or two is going to be, just trying to reset this thing and then become competitive in 2026, 2027. But yeah, I agree with you. Colin says, how many players do you think they actually keep on this team next year? Unfortunately, they're kind of roped into keeping quite a few of them. The better question may be opening day. Jim Darius said this on his podcast. Opening day, like 2027, I say less than 10 players on this roster are still on the Saints roster. Probably between 7 and 9 players on this roster still be on the Saints roster opening day 2027. So there's some guys they're going to have to hang on to for another year or two, including probably Derek Carr. The only way you can save money on his $51 million cap hit is if you designate him as a post-June 1st cut. And if you do that, that doesn't really help you sign another quarterback at free agency. I don't know if you want to use your top 10 pick on a quarterback right now. Probably Derek Carr is going to be your guy next year. I saw another comment in there that Saints are, they're very reliant on Derek Carr as well. Rizzi himself is 3-0 with Derek Carr starting, and I believe 0-4 without him. And overall, they're 5-5 with Derek Carr and 0-6 without him starting. So pretty stark difference there. Obviously, that's not the entire story. Some of those 6 games they've lost without him were against tough teams. They played the Bucs, played the Chargers, played the Packers, played the Commanders, a lot of playoff teams included in those 6 games. So Carr probably loses some of those as well. But still, 5-5 with him, 0-6 without him. So the rebuild conversation, yeah, they need to rebuild. I think, hopefully even Mickey Loomis sees that at this point. He's resisted that to this point. But you can't just keep forging forward with what you've got. And let's dig into this game, because I think some of those points were brought into pretty sharp focus this afternoon here at the Dome, where we'll start with Spencer Rattler. Can Spencer Rattler be your quarterback of the future? That's question number one. I think results are probably still inconclusive, but I'm leaning toward no. Now, he was very good in the first half today. He was 11 of 13, 146 yards, had that trick play touchdown, wasn't sacked. I don't think had a single turnover-worthy play in that first half. He ran for 28 yards on a read option on the first snap of the game. So he had over 170 yards of offense and a touchdown in that first half. 11 of 13 completion. Really, really good. And then he was equally as bad in the second half. He completed only 3 of his first 13 passes in the second half, threw 2 interceptions. I think he completed some yards on that last drive in garbage time and ended up 9 of 22 in the second half for 72 yards. But pretty much a tale of two halves for Spencer Rattler. And we're going to bring on Rod Walker and ask him what he thinks. Our Times-Picayune sports columnist. Go ahead, Rod. We'll let Norm adjust the camera there. Sorry, I didn't see you come from the locker room. But just talking about Spencer Rattler, so we'll start there. He showed some things in this game that let you see some growth, I think. But he's also still very inconsistent.
Yeah, that was one of my talking points in the 3 downs that I do after the game. I thought he didn't take a step backwards, I don't think. So that's a good thing. Still hard to judge him because there were those inconsistencies. I mean, he made the big plays. He made a couple of throws today that I don't think he's made before, like under pressure, like some really good throws. Then he had a couple of throws I thought that maybe could have put a little bit more touch on him instead of just zooming them in there. You might have been a completion. And then toward the end, he had the 2 interceptions. One he threw a little high. On the second one, not sure what happened, but I mean, just
they're forcing the ball at that point.
Yeah, so I didn't really count that one against him as much. But I thought he played better than. I mean, it'd be hard not to play as as bad as you did against Green Bay, but I thought he played better this game.
Yeah, and
I don't know if that means he's like the guy, but I mean, I think you did see some improvement, which you still want to see him with Alvin Kamara and with Chris Olave and with Rashid Shaheed and those guys. And I think, you probably get a better evaluation of them then. But, again, I think we did see some progress today.
I would say he's done enough to be on the roster for next season. And whether that's as a backup, we'll see. But I think you keep him around and kind of continue to let him grow.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, they used a draft pick on him. And I think and obviously he had a bigger sample size than Jake Hayner. But I do think we saw enough from Rattler that, you think he's, a solid backup guy. He could be a decent backup.
Yeah. And if you do decide to cut bait with Derek Carr, you're probably looking at getting a higher draft pick in 2026 anyway. Maybe you roll with Rattler. That's a decision for the offseason. I think the other talking point as we kind of frame this looking toward the future, Rod, is the defense. And this is a defense that just seems to have gotten old all at once. They're young players. They have some young starters, I think, who show some promise, but I don't know that any of them are star players. It's just kind of gone broken all at once.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Raiders offense that was terrible at running the ball. Like they were averaging like 77 yards per carry. I mean, not per carry, per game on the ground. And today they had that in the first half, and they just this team can't stop anybody on the run, and that's kind of been part of the biggest downfall of this defense. But yeah, I mean, they're getting up in age. Possibly Cam Jordan's last game. He talked about how at the end of the game he kind of soaked it up, kind of let it soak in a little bit because his words are kind of like, you never know what's going to happen in this league. So, I mean, he wants to be here. This is the only team he wants to play for, but you just never know what decisions are going to be made when it comes to guys like that. So, he's in his 30s. DeMario's in his 30s. Tyron's in his 30s. Nathan Shepard's in his 30s. I mean, this defense is getting older. I mean, not a whole lot of star power on it. I mean, I think Brian Brzee showed some promise. Pete Werner's, he's been solid, but just not a lot of, they haven't shown a lot this season.
No, certainly not. I mean, I think that was the fear some Saints fans had coming into this season was, well, what if the defense cracks? And it's cracked. And that's when you get a disaster. And obviously combine that with the injuries on offense, and you're looking at 5-11, and honestly, probably kind of lucky to be 5-11 if we look at a few of the wins they've had under Darren Rizzi. Could be worse than that. Today, look, Kendra Miller comes in. He goes out hurt again with a concussion. Rattler is up and down. What do you take away from this offensive performance? I just don't know that we were seeing any guys that you're going to even see play next year outside of a couple of linemen.
Yeah, I mean, I think the line is, you get Eric McCoy back. I mean, the line will be okay, I guess. But, yeah, outside of that, I mean, that's why it's so hard to even judge this game because they were just so limited on offense and just not a lot. I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire got to play a little bit, but, I mean, it's kind of okay. And we never got a chance to see Kendra. I mean, we've been talking about this for 3 weeks. Like, you want to see what he can do, and we just really haven't got a good idea what he can do, because against the Packers they didn't use him, and then today he got hurt. So I mean, the jury's kind of still out on him, and here we are at the end of his second season.
Yeah, it's crazy, but I think you almost have to throw this whole month of December for the offense, kind of throw it away and say, I don't know how much you can evaluate going into next year for Clint Kubiak, for Spencer Rattler, for anybody.
Yeah, and that's the tough part about it, because when you don't make the playoffs, you want to at least be able to evaluate some of these younger guys, and you just can't gauge, what you've seen, because there just hadn't been enough there. So,
all right, big picture, Rod, you've been covering this team for several years now. This was about as sad of an atmosphere, I would say, we've seen in the Dome. It wasn't like there was booing. It didn't get ugly. There was just apathy. There's a good number of Raiders fans in the house who cheered their team, but outside of that, you saw a lot of empty seats. You saw those who were here leave early, and just very, very little to get excited about.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, you think back to that game in September when they played Carolina and lit up the scoreboard with 47 points, and the place was kind of rocking, and you were kind of thinking, okay, this thing's about to turn for this franchise, and it didn't turn, and it doesn't look like it's trending in the right direction to turn. Like, if you're a fan, like right now, I don't know what your optimism, like, there's nothing to have you optimistic about next season. I mean, the coaching hire, Mike can do that, but outside of that, I don't know what you could see this year to make you think that, okay, this team's going to be better next year, because there's just not anything there.
I think we had a comment a little earlier that said this team is playing like a team that has a top 3 pick, but it even managed to screw that up, and they don't have the top 3 pick. They have the number 10 pick if the season ended today. So, not a lot to get excited about. Speaking of the head coach, certainly Darren Rizzi has not helped himself this week with the losses to Green Bay and now to Las Vegas. Do you think he's hurt himself? I mean, I just don't know how much the results matter at this point.
Yeah, I don't know if the results matter, but I don't know if you hire him now. I think, I know you don't make hires based on what the fans want, but I do think the fans are kind of wanting to see something new and fresh. They don't want to be connected to the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era. They kind of want to move on for that instead of just trying to hang on to it, which is kind of what the front office has done. So I think that might, but I don't know. This is an organization that likes, what they're comfortable with. So I think that part gives Rizzi a little bit of an edge. But overall, I just think this franchise needs to go in a completely different direction. It's just time for a fresh start, and they just have to be willing to accept that.
Yeah, it's pretty dreary right now. Obviously, change is needed. Rod, before we let you go, Saints finish with the Bucs next weekend. I mean, it's hard to see anything but more of the same at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the Bucs are still playing for a playoff spot. I mean, I don't see any way that the Saints can go down there. I mean, that game could get really ugly, because the Bucs are trying to get in the playoffs, and it's a division game. And if the Saints, I mean, this Raiders team was not good.
No.
And so, I mean, I don't see anything promising. I don't know if Derek Carr can come back. I actually saw him down there playing with some kids, and just kind of the way he was holding his hand, he didn't look as close as we may have thought it was. I mean, it was just kind of there.
And why?
Yeah, right. Why would you?
He's got an injury guarantee in his contract all these things. I realize he may want to, but if he's not ready, there's no point.
Yeah, you want to get some more Spencer Rattler and just see if he can take another step or something maybe. But other than that game next week is really, really meaningless, except for those guys at the bottom of the roster that are trying to figure out what their future is.
All right, he's Rod Walker. He's going to have a column in the Times-Picayune. I guess it'll be on New Year's Eve, right? On Tuesday morning's paper, talking about some of the biggest Saints stories of the year and how this year has gone for the Saints. So thanks, Rod, and we'll bring on Jeff Duncan, who's here, fresh from the locker room. A couple of other comments real quick. Hakeem says the team needs an infusion of new ideas and youth. Have no superstars to build around. Need 2 years of drafting and development, and maybe in 2027. That's where we're at, Jeff.
2027, man. I mean, look, the one thing about the NFL, I would say, is this is one league where you can turn it around very quickly. All it takes is one really strong offseason. I've seen it happen a couple of times in my tenure here. I saw it happen in my first year on the beat. The team was 3-13 the year before under Mike Ditka, and they ended up winning the NFC West Division, winning the first playoff game in franchise history under Jim Haslett. No one saw that coming, and then, of course, after the Katrina season when the organization was in way worse shape than they are right now. They turned it around, went to the NFC Championship game a year later with the right coaching hire and, of course, the miraculous acquisition of Drew Brees. So it can happen. You have to have a lot of things go right, but this is the one league where you can turn things around quickly.
We have a Hall of Fame quarterback coming on the free agent market
maybe
this offseason.
We'll see.
Maybe so.
But look, the thing I'm trying to make clear, though, is there's a lot of work to do here. I mean, you could see it today. You saw it Monday night against the Packers, one of the elite teams in the league. The team really couldn't compete. This was one of the bottom feeders in the league. And really, it was pretty one-sided, frankly. I mean, they kind of got dominated on both sides of the ball. I don't think we saw that coming. So there's a lot of work to do here. And I think Saints fans are frustrated, rightfully so, with how things have gone. But you can't give up hope. I mean, you have to kind of see how this offseason plays out. But, we've seen it turn around before. I just think a lot of people are questioning now the direction of the organization, and I think that's a fair question right now.
I think you have to question everything. We talked Monday night about the Packers dominating time of possession among many other things on Monday night. Well, today the Raiders were 37-50 compared to the Saints 22-10. So it wasn't any better really against, as you said, a bad team. This is the worst season the Saints have had now officially since that Katrina season, and before that the 99 season that you referenced. So it's as ugly as it can get. What is the proper way to evaluate this? The Saints have salary cap issues. We don't know what they'll do with a head coach. I mean, is it ever a possibility that Mickey Loomis is going to say, okay, we have to blow this up? He's resisted that idea for years now.
Well, I don't think we know that yet. I mean, those discussions, I'm sure they've gone on behind closed doors internally. I'm sure they're already looking ahead to the offseason. But I think the really heavy lifting on that will be done once the season is over after next week. But, I mean, make no mistake, there's going to be a lot of changes here. I think there's going to be changes on the roster. I think there's going to be changes to other parts of the organization. But if people are expecting, and we hear a lot of groundswell right now from certain segments of the fan base, about Mickey Loomis's future here, I think more than likely you're going to see little changes in that area of the decision-making apparatus at the organization. Just from what I've been able to gather, they feel like they're part of the solution, not the problem. And so I think that if you're wishing for that, I'd say you might want to look for something else right now.
Don't hold your breath.
Yeah, I just look at, but those decisions haven't been made yet. I mean, they're going to be made in the next few weeks. But I know people in the building are very frustrated and disappointed, but I'm not sure right now if we understand just how big of an off-season job this is going to be. And whatever head coach comes in here, if there is a new head coach and a new coaching staff, I mean, they're going to have a clear plan on how to fix this thing, given all the problems with the roster and the salary cap issues. I'd say in a lot of ways, Zach, this is every bit probably as big a challenge as what Sean Payton faced when he came in here in 2006. Now, can they find another Sean Payton? Can they find another visionary and, maybe have a lot of things fall into place? It can happen, but, the expectation is that's going to be difficult, I think.
Yeah. Brian says rumors of Glenn getting the job because it's more of the same with Loomis in control. I don't. Aaron Glenn is going to be in the playoffs for a long time. I mean, we're a long ways away from any of that.
Let me just say this. I mean, people see a rumor out there, they see something floated out there, and they start jumping to conclusions. We're a long way from anybody getting this job. A long way. I mean, Aaron Glenn interviewed here a few years ago. He's familiar with the organization. I would say this, though. I do think there is some rationale to looking at a coach on the defensive side of the ball. That clearly is where the biggest issues are. Mm-hmm. And I think the organization, I know, they like this offensive coaching staff. I think they feel good about this offense, and maybe when they get all the pieces back, that being fine. So it would make sense to side with defense. I'm not saying that's definitely what they're doing, but it makes sense logically. Mm-hmm. So I think people are putting two and two together. Darren Glenn is defense coordinator. He's been here before, and they're jumping way too soon to conclusions there. I mean, we haven't even gone through the interview process. That's not going to happen for weeks ahead of time. So don't get carried away with something you see on social media or a rumor floated out there because it's just idle speculation right now.
And Aaron Glenn may not even want this job. This is
Right.
probably the worst job that's open. So we're many steps away from that. Jeff, before we let you go, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you what you thought of Spencer Rattler's performance. He was obviously very good in the first half, 11 of 13, over 160 total yards, counting rushing. Equally as bad in the second half.
Yeah, we just talked to him, and I have to agree with Darren Rizzi. I think it's a very tough evaluation because he didn't get a lot of help. I mean, a lot of balls were dropped. The protection was not very good at times today. I don't know enough about who was responsible for some of the protection issues. A lot of times that is on the quarterback. Mm-hmm. He did airmail one that led to an interception. That's on him. Darren Rizzi mentioned that today. The accuracy is still a problem for him. And I think it's always going to be a problem for him. I don't think that's going to get better at this point of his career. It was a problem in college. So you can see the flashes of potential. He threw some very nice balls today, a couple of really nice, accurate balls on time. He showed the mobility we've seen. So there's some qualities there that I think are very positive. But he's also still very rough around the edges. And look, he's a fifth-round draft pick being thrust into a difficult position. But this was not a great defense they were going against today. I mean, this is a defense that's been lit up by a lot of teams in the league. And the Saints weren't able to run the ball. I mean, they just had so many issues on offense, couldn't stay on the field, inconsistency, a lot of penalties that brought back some of his better plays. So it's hard to judge what you have in Spencer Rattler because of all the extenuating circumstances around him. But I think it's way too soon either to give up on him if you're in that court, or to say he's the future. I think it's way too early to say either way right now. I think you just have to kind of get him reps. I think every rep he gets at this level right now is good for him, his development down the road. But I do not think he's going to be the starting quarterback here next year. I'd be very surprised at that.
Questions at quarterback, questions on the rest of the offense, questions at head coach, and questions on defense, which is what your column was about today. Yes. Just a defense that's kind of gotten old and bad all at once. They let Amir Abdullah, who's been in the league for 10 years, run for a career high, I think 115 yards today.
I think they came in averaging 77 rushing yards a game.
Doubled that, 158. Yeah. So
a lot of work to do there.
Not good. Not good all around. He's Jeff Duncan. You can read his column at NOLA.com later today and in the Times-Picayune tomorrow morning. Bring on our next visitor here, our next expert.
Matt Paris,
and that is Matthew Paris, our beat writer. One of our Saints beat writers for the Times-Picayune. Ugly. 25-10 to one of the worst teams in the league. And really, that was probably an accurate final score. Saints did not deserve to be in this game. Saints were not in this game at the end.
Yeah, no, they beat the Giants, but they were very close to losing, and you've lost to the Panthers, the Raiders, and you had to barely scrap by the Giants. Not great.
No, not a great team, and yet they won at least one of those games to keep themselves from getting a really high draft pick too. So
right.
It's all bad news for the Saints today. They lose 25-10. Matt, I guess we'll just go through. We'll start on the defensive side, and as I just mentioned with Jeff, just feels like a defense that's gotten old and bad all at once. The young players, not that Brian Brzee has no promise, and they have Alontae Taylor. Some young players who maybe show some promise. They don't seem to have any budding stars, and the stars they did have are now kind of over the hill.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think the way to put it is Amir Abdullah had his first 100-yard game today, and I thought, oh, that's cool. He's been in the league for like a few years. I looked up. He's been in the league 10 years.
10 years.
141 games.
Congrats, Amir. Yeah.
His first 100-yard rushing game, courtesy of the New Orleans Saints. I think that just about says it all about how bad that run defense has been this year.
Pretty bad. And I think maybe worse for the franchise is that the fans aren't even here to boo. There's just apathy. I don't think they see a path forward. Obviously, a lot of change has to take place. Where do you think that starts for the Saints?
Well, I think assuming they don't shake up the front office, you've got to hire the right coach. I mean, apologies to Darren Rizzi. He's had an extended stretch here now. Doesn't look like he's made a solid case to be the permanent head coach. I don't know how you bring him back. And so you've got to really find that guy, whether that's making a clean break from the Sean Payton era and totally shaking things up, or whether that's bringing in someone like Aaron Glenn, who has ties to this franchise but has done an impressive job in Detroit. I mean, I'll let the Saints decide that, but something completely new, I think, is needed for this team.
Absolutely. They have one game left in Tampa Bay next week, but I mean, I don't think any of us can expect them to win that game at this point. Tampa Bay needs the win to possibly clinch the division, and the Saints just got nothing left. Spencer Rattler, at halftime, his numbers, I've mentioned him a couple times, 11 of 13, 146 yards. Also the 22-yard carry on his or 28-yard carry, 28-yard carry on his on the first play of the game. But then in the second half, his accuracy left him. He was not helped out by his receivers or his offensive line or the game state. So things were more difficult. But again, it just kind of some ups and some downs for the rookie.
Yeah, he fell apart in the second half again. I mean, we saw that in the Tampa game. Even in the Denver game, he was significantly worse in the second half than he was the first. That's just kind of what happens. And he's not dealing with a great hand, but I thought even in the second half, I mean, some of the throws, seems like he was pressing a little bit. His receivers didn't do him any favors, but the first half was, okay, at least we've seen some progress. It's going to be the silver lining of this game. But he just fell apart in the second half, and that's a tough look for him.
Yeah. Final thoughts, Matt. You kind of mentioned it at the top, but I think we're looking at one of the worst teams in the NFL, the way things have turned out, particularly with all the injuries on offense, but also with a defense that doesn't have the injury excuse. And here we are. They're losing by 2 touchdowns at home to a 3-12 team.
Yeah, I mean, the problems this season have gone much beyond the injuries. The defense has been healthy, as you said, outside a few guys. But even now, it's just like the front seven is mostly intact. And the front seven is probably the biggest problem of why these games have gone out of control the way they have, is because the defensive line, outside maybe the Washington game, which they lost, and the New York game, has been kind of pushed aside. They've been bullied. They've been kind of just dominated up front, and that's been a big reason. I mean, that was kind of the core identity under Dennis Allen's defenses for years, was those defenses were setting the tone with their line, and that's just something I think needs a complete overhaul going into the offseason.
Complete overhaul is a good phrase to end on. I think that's probably what's needed here. He's Matthew Parrish. You can read his game story on NOLA.com now. He's going to go work that up a little bit more, and we will bring on Luke Johnson to finish the show here. Luke is our other Times-Picayune Saints beat writer. Luke, how was that locker room after this performance?
Actually, I just sat out and waited for Cam Jordan to talk. So he's the only person I talked to in there.
I was going to ask you
the most interesting story out of today's game.
Cam Jordan did the Who Dat chant to open today. I know he mentioned in the postgame about soaking things in. Do you think this was his last game in the Superdome?
I think there's a very real possibility. I think Cam went into this game knowing that was a chance. So yeah, I think he clearly wanted to, take in the atmosphere of the moment here. Obviously, it wasn't much of an atmosphere, but there was a bunch of Saints fans who hung out till the very end, and Cam made his way over to them, signed a bunch of autographs after the game. He understands that, like, he definitely wants to keep playing. He understands it just may not happen here.
Yeah. And that's probably the theme of today, is that it's become beyond obvious that change is needed here. I mean, I think for a little while you kind of entertained that, well, maybe Darren Rizzi can turn it back around, and maybe they can get healthy, and maybe this and maybe that. And I don't know that there's anybody who
there's no more talking yourself into it, right? The last 2 weeks they've been outscored 59-10. One of those teams one of the better teams in the NFL, and one of them was one of the worst teams in the NFL. It's just. It's like whatever they've been trying to hang on to here, it's gone. It's definitely time for some major changes here. I don't think there's any way around that.
And the question is, of course, Mickey Loomis, who always seems to be the last person who wants to admit that it's time for change, does he see that? And that's a question for the offseason. But for right now, today, we'll just, again, recap one more time. Defense, very bad. Spencer Rattler, very inconsistent. What stuck out to you?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was the defensive performance. When you're looking at the starting 11 from week 1, 2 players are missing from it. One of them they traded away, and another one broke his leg. And you've got 2 pretty good players, or 2 players who you are pretty high on, filling in for those guys. It's Alontae Taylor and Kool-Aid McKinstry filling in for Marshawn Lattimore and Paulson Adebo. Front seven's been healthy, and they gave up 156 rushing yards today to literally the worst rushing attack in football. I heard Matt using the stat, but I mean, Amir Abdullah has been in the NFL for 10 years. He's never had a 100-yard rushing game until today, and he did it by the end of the third quarter. Yeah, it's incredibly disappointing from them, just considering how healthy they've been on the front. And it's really just kind of if you want to look at how far this organization's fallen, you start there.
Yeah,
because that was always something you could bank on with this team. It was always something that was going to make them competitive, is they had a really good defense, really good run defense in particular. Wasn't the case today. I mean, Aiden O'Connell tore them up. When you're getting beat by Aiden O'Connell and Amir Abdullah 10 years into his career, there's change that needs to happen on that side of the ball.
Nothing against those gentlemen, but let's call it what it is. Yeah, Aiden O'Connell, 20 of 35, 242 yards, 2 touchdowns. Amir Abdullah, 20 carries, 115 yards. Brock Bowers, 7 catches, 77 yards, which actually might have been below expectations. I don't know.
Yeah, I would have definitely taken I would have definitely thought more for him.
But they didn't need him in the fourth quarter, so that's part of that. There was a couple of times on 2nd and 3rd and long that the Raiders just ran a draw play, which is something you do almost it would just take a few yards and punt, and they got first downs out of it. I mean, just a pretty damning performance all the way around for the Saints defense. On the offensive side of the ball, obviously, almost every starting skill position player is injured. The offensive line's intact in 3 positions, but
it's not really intact.
Taliesin Fuanga had a couple of penalties today. Don't think it was his best day. And Spencer Rattler, we've mentioned it a few times now, but just continues to be super inconsistent.
It's I think for most of the first 3 quarters, he was actually pretty good. And when their offense started really slowing down in the second half, a lot of that was pretty good passes that weren't being caught by receivers. They had probably 3 or 4 drops in that third quarter alone, when they had a couple back-to-back 3-and-outs. You could see it. You could talk yourself into it. And then the fourth quarter comes, he throws 2 interceptions, both really bad balls. One was a tip pass interception, but he had a receiver wide open. He threw it way too high for him. So it's like what you have to live with when you have a 5th-round rookie quarterback starting for you, and all of the offensive infrastructure around him is like replacement players.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Luke, final thoughts on today? That the Saints probably wish they didn't have a game left. They do.
I wish they didn't have a game left.
And then it's finally time after that to start talking about the changes they're going to make.
Yeah, changes, and look at despite the fact that they're 5-11, they can't really do much better in the draft order.
Need a bunch of upsets.
Yeah. There's a lot of 4-12 teams, but because of their strength of schedule, it'd be hard to actually leapfrog anybody. They might be kind of locked in at number 9 if they lose next week, and that might be as high as it can go. They're number 10 right now, so we'll look at draft stuff, and then really, I mean, the main focus for everybody around here, for us in the media, for the fans, for the front office, the ownership group, is how are we going to make the big changes that are going to be the right changes. This is the most games they've lost in a single season since the Hurricane Katrina year, which obviously that was a terrible year for a lot of different reasons. And they made 2 of the best decisions a franchise could ever make by nailing the head coach and the quarterback, right? And they got out of it really quickly. I mean, the stuff they're working with now is a little bit more complicated than it was then, but they can get themselves out of this if they make the right moves. But it's paramount on them to do that. So I don't know what that is all going to entail. There's a lot of different ways this can go.
I'll end with this, and I'm going to put you on the spot just a minute. You're going to have a chance in 8 or 9 days to actually do this. But if you could ask Mickey Loomis one question today, what would it be?
Do you feel confident that you're coming back?
Yeah.
I mean, he's been here since 2002. He's I don't know it off the top of my head, but he's been the longest tenured GM in football. Does he feel like he deserves to come back? Does he feel that there's any confidence in him from the ownership and team president? And should he come back? I don't know. There's a lot of different ways you can frame that, but I think. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that he'll be back in 2025.
All right. He's Luke Johnson. There you have it. We've got a week to go, and then we can start talking about these changes. We appreciate all of you joining us for the Saints Insider postgame show. It's brought to you by Tulane Doctors. Our final score today was Raiders 25, Saints 10 for our producer, Spencer Urquhart, and cameraman Norman Bell. Our thanks to Luke Johnson, Matthew Paris, Jeff Duncan, and Rod Walker. And I'm Zach Ewing. We'll see you next time on the Saints Insider.